Mi chamocha bailim Adonai. Mi chamocha nedar
March 13th through 15th. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and start going through today's topic. For those of you who were not here last month, we talked about a topic that has been extremely important, I think, for all of Israel to understand, and that was the topic of honor and shame. Today we're going to be talking about justice and righteousness. And I think that the majority of us have an idea of what justice and righteousness really is. But hopefully after today we're going to see that we really have no clue. And I hate to say it that way, but this is a topic that Rico, Ryan, and myself have been studying for a little over a year now. Some of you have been doing it with us. We have an online yeshiva that is connected to Wisdom and Torah Ministries, that we have been focusing just on one book and one resource, and I'll show you that resource in a minute, but we're going chapter by chapter in this website. It's an online, set up like a college program. Frank and Daisy are part of it. I think some others are here that are part of it as well, but I encourage you to, especially after we discuss this today, you may want to think about joining us on that yeshiva course. But these two backdrops of justice and righteousness and honor and shame, we're not going to be able to go into a whole lot about honor and shame, but these are two very essential backdrops to understanding Scripture and ancient covenant. I know that there are many backdrops. We said this before, we say it many times, there are many backdrops that are essential for us to understand Scripture, but these two have been the ones that have flipped us inside out, upside down, backwards, forwards, you name it. Because it is something that I think that whatever we are choosing to label ourselves, and we're going to talk about labels, is that the majority of us have not been walking in justice and righteousness or honoring the King the way he's supposed to be honored. We're a little bit more focused on honoring ourselves and claiming that we're righteous because we think that we're keeping commandments. Okay. For those of you who are fairly new to walking Torah, some of the things that you hear me say today, please do not get offended. When you hear me speak about Christianity or Judaism or another religion, I'm talking about the dogma of religion and the things that are attached to religion. Okay. With that being said, we seem to have this mentality that we're going to win Christianity over by beating them over the head and casting them into hell and doing all these things and showing them all of the things that they're doing wrong.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. Ken says, whatever it takes. Take that Bible and just beat them over the head. Cole mentioned this earlier, is when we get upset with people who have no idea what they're doing. We seem to forget that we were all in that spot at some point or another. Okay, so with that being said, one thing I'm going to say that's probably going to offend some people is going to be right now. And I want to do it as posing a question to you. What if I told you that our brothers and sisters who are in Christianity and who are still in the church have something over us, Hebrew roots, walking in covenant for believers in the Messiah, and that they have something over us? That's not giving anybody a free pass, but it is the reality. We're going to talk about what that is because it's linked directly to justice and righteousness. Remember, we talked a little bit about form and function and mechanics versus character, and those are two very hard topics to grasp. Because we're so focused now that we have come out of church, or we have come out of religion, or whatever we've come out of, that we keep commandments now. We got it. We are the bomb. We know it all. We have all the answers. No, we're not talking about you, Bob. So, this is the book that we have been using in the course. It's by a gentleman named Moshe Weinfeld, called Social Justice in Ancient Israel and in the Ancient Near East. You can get this book anywhere on Amazon. If you are part of the course that we're doing, we're providing the chapters of this book in PDF, chapter by chapter, as the chapters come out. So you can either just join the course and we'll give you the PDF chapters that way, or you can go and buy the book. But this is the main resource for this, and from this book and from these topics. Now, when I was preparing for this, I posted this on Facebook, and some of you have seen it, but between the three of us on the website is we have over 200 some slides on this topic, and I had to pick 30. I have 37. I'm hoping we're going to get through every slide. It's a very deep topic that goes and can stem into so many different areas, and that's what really it boils down to. And that's what has happened. Okay, so mechanics versus character, and form versus function. We've already talked a little bit about that. We also can link keeping the commandments versus the weightier matters. Everybody here know what the weightier matters of the Torah are? Oh, that's a good one. Our society, and especially within our congregations and our groups of the Hebrew roots or Messianic or whatever we're calling ourselves, we seem to be consistently in this versus or war mentality where it's either one or the other. Or if we think we're beating him over the head with those three categories on the left, that means we have those three categories on the right. Either has to do one or other within the mentality of religion. Is this really what we are supposed to be doing? Are we really supposed to just focus on the mechanics? Huh? Both. And Chris has a mic. If somebody has something they want to add, and you will be limited, and if you spoke, please don't speak again. We have to keep this on track and in schedule. But this is a discussion. I'm not here to tell you have to believe everything I'm telling you. If anybody knows anything about what we do, is we tell you go check it for yourself. We're not making this stuff up. Good.
This is today's information.
What is happening? Hey, there we go. That was weird. Okay, so what is the covenant mandate of Israel? Israel's mission is to do justice and righteousness, and it first appears in Scripture with God's call to the father of the nation, Abraham. Now, how I've structured this PowerPoint is hopefully what we're going to do is give you verses up front to show you that this is all in Scripture. We pulled out certain verses, and then we're going to go into how this connects with Yeshua, the first century, and then it's going to connect to how it is related to us. So we're just going to go through, and this is hopefully how we're going to speed the PowerPoint up a little bit. So, the first time you see the word justice, mishpat, in Scriptures in Genesis 18:19, it says, I have chosen Abraham that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of Yah by doing righteousness and justice, so that Yah may bring about for Abraham what he has promised. Now, I don't know if you remember, but immediately after this verse is what we begin to see what? Come on, Bible scholars. Chapter 18 of Genesis. The very next verses and chapters after this is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? We all have this mentality that Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed for what?
Homosexuality.
What else? Somebody said it over here.
Pride.
Failure to be hospitable.
Yes, two people I heard say it. That is the main reason. Yes, we know that they were in sin. We know that they had homosexuality, every rampant piece of idolatry you can imagine. The main reason, and you can verify this yourselves, the main reason why Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other cities were destroyed is because they oppressed these strangers. They neglected those within their communities and that visited their communities, I mean, in ways that are just beyond belief. Go back and look at the book of Jasher for this specific time frame, and it's a good resource to show you just exactly what they were doing to the strangers that would come and visit their land. Okay? That's huge. Remember, we're serving an Elohim who says that he is the one who brings justice and righteousness. He is the one who deserves all the honor, and everybody else needs to be shamed. These two topics are huge, guys. Isaiah 5:7. For the vineyard of Yah of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. And he looked for justice, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but heard a cry. We've already talked about the cry. He was looking for Israel to be the ones that maintain justice and righteousness. If I'm going too fast with the slides and you guys are writing notes, scream out. Jeremiah 4:1-2. If you do return, O Yisrael, declares Yah, return to me. And if you remove your abominations from my presence and cease straying, and shall swear as Yah lives in truth, in justice, and in righteousness, then the nations shall bless themselves in him, and they shall boast in him. Now, just with those few verses, and trust me, it was really difficult to pick and choose which verses to put in this, because this is literally everywhere. And if you do your own study and you go back and you read this resource that we have, you'll be able to find all the places that he's talking about justice and righteousness. They are linked together. And Yeshua's entire identity of being Mashiach, of being Messiah, his words, his parables, and his deeds are formulated around justice and righteousness. Otherwise, he cannot be the Messiah, right?
Amen.
Yes.
I'm just going to mention that verse prior to this, it mentions three parameters. It says the truth,
Yes.
justice, and righteousness. Justice and righteousness without truth is meaningless. And the truth is we need to define what truth is. It's Yeshua, it's the Messiah, it's the olive God, it's the scriptures.
The word of Elohim.
And that's where we have the justice and the righteousness go forth from.
Right. So if we realize that, and we realize that he has to commit these acts of justice and righteousness, but we really don't understand what righteousness and justice is outside of keeping commandments and how it was perceived in ancient Near Eastern cultures. Remember, this is not just how Israel thought. This is how all other nations perceived acts of justice and righteousness. Let's take Egypt, for instance. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. Modern day nations, when they are formulating governments, they go back and they study ancient Egyptian laws from what we actually have left of understanding their laws. They study because the Egyptians all believed that justice and righteousness was at the very core of every individual and at the core of the hierarchy of the kingdom. That means that they had to commit acts of justice and righteousness if they wanted to enter into the afterlife. Hello. They're not doing something pagan because they're trying to do things that are just and righteous. It wasn't just the Israelites that believed this. Matthew 6:33. But seek first the reign of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these matters shall be added to you. Now we're already on slide 11. We have to extend this a little bit. Psalm 89:14. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Kindness and truth go before your face. So, righteousness and justice are the foundation of Yah's throne. Hebrews 1, 8 through 9. But to the Son he says, your throne, O Elohim, is forever and ever. A scepter of straightness is the scepter of your reign. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Because of this, Elohim, your Elohim, has anointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions. Now, I know we all have this mentality that lawlessness only means breaking the commandments. That is not only what it means. We are lacking severely. Matthew 23:23. Here we go. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you tithe the mint and the anise and the cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the Torah, justice and mercy and faith. These need to have been done without neglecting the others. So did Yeshua have a problem with the way they were keeping commandments? Okay, let me rephrase. The mechanics of the Torah. Did he have really a whole lot of issues with what they were doing with the mechanics? Yes, we know that they added to. I'm not talking about that. You never see a calendar argument. You never see them arguing over what day the feast days are or the way they pronounce the Father's name. His issue was with how they were neglecting the poor, the widow, the orphan, so on and so forth. Those are the weightier matters. So what is justice and righteousness? Now that we have a few verses under our mindset, we can begin to figure out just exactly what justice and righteousness is. Establishing justice and righteousness in the ancient Near East. Okay, one thing that you have to remember is that we serve a Elohim of equity. That means there are no second-class citizens within the kingdom. No second-class citizens within the kingdom. So one of the ways, or many ways that we're going to look at now that how they would establish justice and righteousness in their nations is canceling of debts of the state and individuals, liberation of slaves and freeing prisoners, restoration of land and inheritance to original owners, rectification of economic injustice, overpricing, improper weights and measures, establishing laws to protect the less fortunate. Now, when is this usually supposed to happen within Israel? The Jubilee. Shemitah. The 7-year Sabbath rest and the Jubilee. Did they do this? No. Returning exiles to their homeland. Restoration of the temple. Elimination of exploitation. Elimination or punishment of the exploiters or the oppressors. Establishing equality for all people and division of the land to the needy. So these are all the different things that would happen when you would have a king rise to power, and he would normally do some sort of jubilee or liberation for the people. Now, just like our modern day governmental system, the way it is structured, when do we see politicians?
Election year.
Election year, knocking on your door. Why? They want your vote. They're going to promise you all sorts of acts of liberation. They're going to exploit the oppressors. They're going to do all these things. And this is how most of the kings would do things. Is they all would rise to power or conquer a land, say they're going to do these things, and then they would only to choose so many or to choose to do them at a specific level. Yah doesn't do that. And this is one of the major issues, especially with where we're at in the Torah portion right now, is I was talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to now, but there's a structure and a reason why the plagues were sent forth by Yah, in which they were. Okay? Remember, we just talked about a few minutes ago that it was Egypt's mentality to be the kingdom of justice and righteousness. It was Pharaoh who was supposed to carry that out, because it starts at the top. It starts with him as king, then his messenger or his viceroy, which, hello, remember Joseph? Was he not a shadow of Messiah?
That's right.
And he did all of these things that we just listed when he came to power. And did you know that in history, that when the viceroy or the second in command in Egypt's kingdom was put into power in the 18th, I think it's the 12th or the 18th, I know it's a wide range, but I can't remember what number it was. But either the 12th or the 18th dynasty is they would put the viceroy or the second in command in charge of maintaining justice and righteousness. It wasn't even the pharaoh. And once they did that, is they became the most prosperous time during that dynasty. And I believe that that was Joseph in which they're referring to. So, terminology for justice and righteousness. These are just some different terms. The ones that you see on the right, these are Akkadian terms. If you read this book that we're reading, you're going to see that there's a lot of Akkadian terms in there, so you can see that the language is similar. The meanings and the definitions are similar to the Hebrew definition. How the culture was perceived in all the ancient Near Eastern nations for justice and righteousness is similar to Israel's. Remember, Yah's not doing anything pagan. He has to maintain that he is the king who brings justice. He is the one who is righteous. It isn't any of these other gods. It isn't any of these pharaohs. It isn't any of these kings. And this is why he publicly shames these people. He publicly shames their gods. Because he is the one who deserves all of the honor.
Amen.
And this ties into Yeshua. So, justice and righteousness. Katam u misharam shakanu. I can speak Akkadian. Kindness and mercy, granting of freedom, and durarum shakanu. Establishing righteousness, establishing liberty. Now keep these terms in mind, because when you start going through the Brit Hadashah and you're seeing these terms, is they're directly linked to justice and righteousness. So not only is it about maintaining the weightier matters of the Torah and maintaining, taking care of the needy, the widow, the poor, the orphan, but it's a relationship, if that's a word, concept to where you're getting something in return when it is done for you. More terminology. Establishing equity. Being upright. A king being referred to as the sun or a reference to shining forth. Oh my gosh. You know how many people think that's a pagan verse? Because they see that it's talking about that in Isaiah 58, that it is the sun, S-U-N. It's an idiom. That idiom is linked to a king rising up and being like the sun who commits acts of justice and righteousness for his people. It's not a pagan verse. I heard some giggles, but trust me, man, it's crazy what people say. The king being referred to as a shepherd. I think we've heard that before. Bringing the good news. That is also linked to the royal messenger. So how is justice and righteousness established? Now this is where we're going to make the connections to the great acts that Yeshua has done. Because they're all linked to everything that goes on with the Jubilee, goes with the Shemitah, and we're supposed to carry out those acts ourselves. So, proclamation of freedom. Liberty by a royal figure. We can see that in Ezra 1:1. Now, King Cyrus, when you go back and you look at it, King Cyrus was a shadow picture of the Father. Was he a pagan king? Yes. But if you understand justice and righteousness and how it was established, you will see that Yah is the one who allowed King Cyrus to rise to power and to set the Israelites free and give them liberation. Ezra 1:1 says, Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Yah by the mouth of Yirmiyahu might be fulfilled. Yah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying, the rest of the verse right there. But these verses go on, if you continue in chapter 1, to show that he is the one who set the Israelites free. He allowed them to build their temples. He gave them their inheritance back. And he did everything to restore the honor to the Israelites. This is King Cyrus, a pagan king, who does this.
He's actually called Messiah.
Yes. Yes. Isaiah 61:1. You see the proclamation of freedom. So you have how they would do this. We tend to forget that as we're living in the 21st century, and we watch on the news and we see all of these leaders of other nations interacting with each other. That's how they did it back then. You know, we see Obama calling people up on the phone and all that kind of stuff. They didn't have technology back then. Most of the times the kings were out in battle. So whenever they were sent out or they were trying to establish their own authority, they would send out a royal messenger. We talked about messengers a little bit already. So Isaiah 61:1, the Spirit of the Master Yah is upon me because Yah has anointed me to bring good news to the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yah, and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn. This is Yah talking about Yeshua. He is the one who sent him with all the authority as the royal messenger. So he's proclaiming by sending Yeshua out and sending the prophets out for that matter. All the prophets are also royal messengers. They had, when the prophets were on the earth, they had more authority than any king that was on this planet. Did you know that? It's the same with Yeshua. He was given all the authority to come and proclaim that he was going to be setting people free, liberating them, and establishing back their inheritance. So, signal of coming freedom. So whenever these kings would rise to power, they all had signals, they all had signs. We love shadow pictures. We love signals. We love seeing these things. All of this has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. The king would rise to power, and they all had certain symbols that they would give to let their people know, to let their nations know that they were liberating them. They were going to give them this act of freedom, this act of liberation. They were going to restore them back to their lands. They were going to free their debts. So one of those signs is blowing of the shofar. Leviticus 25:10, Isaiah 27:13. Lifting up the torch as proclamation, as we see in Isaiah 62:1. A banner or pole at the gates of the city as an act of permanent liberation. Now keep in mind, just because the kings of the ancient Near East did this, doesn't mean that they held what they were doing. So this is why we see these similar signs within the Bible, within the Torah. And I want you to pay particular attention to the ones that we have highlighted in red. Banner pole at the gates of the city as an act of permanent liberation. Isaiah 42:1, behold my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him, he shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles. This is another sending forth the royal messenger to proclaim the coming freedom. Matthew 3:3, for this is he who was spoken of by the prophet Yeshayahu, saying, a voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of Yah, make his paths straight. Now, I want you to take a look at this picture. Can everybody see this pretty okay? This is a picture of the location where Yeshua was set on the stake. If you look closely, you'll see that the temple would have been over here. You go across to the Mount of Olives. Remember, we already talked about the cosmic mountain a little bit. Yeshua was up there. Okay? Now, before I hit the next slide, we have this mentality that we want to scream pagan, 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 pagan. My shoes are pagan. I mean, we're crying out loud, everything's pagan. I understand they need to know. But if we neglect understanding what the signs and the symbols are and not bowing down to the symbols, but we recognize what they are, we don't have to be offended when we see the next slide.
That's right. Good setup.
If you're offended, I'm sorry, but for me, after knowing this, knowing what justice and righteousness is, and knowing what the symbol is outside the gate, and knowing that it was a pole, and that is a sign of my coming freedom and my inheritance being restored back to me, I don't have to be offended by seeing it. But I don't have to worship it either.
That's right.
John 12:32. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be driven out. And when I am lifted up, the torch, the pole, set outside the gate. I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself.
Hallelujah.
Isaiah 11:10. On that day, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal, as a banner to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious.
Amen.
So if you look at this, and we know that when they would establish justice and righteousness, they would cancel out all debts of state and individuals. They would liberate the slaves and free prisoners. They would restore the land and the inheritance to the original owners. Rectification of economic injustice or overpricing.